I actually use AES? AES is a block cipher. So it gets input of size 16. AES is only 16 bytes. Input of size 16, which is called the plaintext. Another input, which is called the key. How long is the key? Could be 16, 20, 24 bytes. Does it can improve security a little bit, and it crunches, and then the device crunches this plain text, and out comes the ciphertext. Fine, great. So can I do this in reverse? Can I do it back to front? Yeah, if I give it the ciphertext and the key, can I get the plain text? Yeah, right. This is decryption. This is decryption. Okay. So if I give it the plain text and the ciphertext, can I get the key? This is kind of magical, right? From the plain text and the key, I can get the ciphertext. From the ciphertext and the key, I can get the plain text, but I can't get from the plain text and the ciphertext the key. Why is that? Why is that? Well, rapid or fun. Okay, all of you. Okay, you learned some. So let me talk about. So first of all, in theory, you can just try all the keys until you get the right one. But practically, it's very difficult, and the reason is that the mathematical relationship between the key and the plain text is such a high degree polynomial, or high degree equation, that it's not efficiently solvable. If you use the plain text and the key right, there is structure which allows you to do it efficiently. But if you're trying to go from the plain text and the ciphertext to the key, it's very difficult. How can I make it easier? I can use side channel information. I'm not sure I will have time to cover it this year, but there is a fascinating work on. This is called algebraic side channel analysis, and maybe maybe I'll have some time to cover it. It's fascinating, part of my PhD. So, AES is always using 128 bits of plain text and ciphertext, and the key can be a little longer if you want. There's no real security advantage in it right now. 128-bit AES is that secure, totally secure for all practical reasons. But the AES, when it begins running, it does something called key expansion, which turns whatever key you give it into a bunch of round keys. And these round keys are also 128-bit keys. So you crunch the key, and you get a lot of round keys out of it. And, okay, so this is the basic building block of AES. It encrypts a block of 16 bytes. But what happens if I have more than 16 bytes? What happens if I have an entire file? How do I use AES to encrypt an entire file? Lasers, right? So what OL wrote down very, very cleverly is what is called a cipher mode. So the cipher mode is a question: how do you combine? How do you use the cipher multiple times to encrypt a large bunch of data? אני מלמד. Okay. Excuse me. Right. So one thing you can do is what is called an encrypted codebook, ECB. Is you just take the plain text, you divide it into blocks, and you use it as AES. And I'm very happy that you know that Zoom was using ECB. Now, ECB, you can cryptanalyze it using standard cryptanalysis, using statistics. And now the more modern thing to do is to use a proper cipher mode for example, CBC. CBC has a problem that you can't parallelize it because each block is a function of the block before. So that's not very fashionable. So what people use is GCM, which is, you know what, I don't care. You know what, I don't care. This is the crypto course. For all I care, you just you take 16 bits come in, 16 bytes come out. The key goes in the middle, and if you want to do something else, then you're very, very great for you. What if I have less than 16 bytes, by the way? Yeah, I need to pad. And padding is also an art. Padding properly is also an art. And again, I'm not going to cover it. So, why did AES win? Why did Rindal win the AES competition? So there wasn't like an official post that says these are the grades that each cipher got, and this is why he does this. But we kind of know what the competition was looking for, so we know why it won. So first of all of the finalists of the competition, all of the 5 ciphers that got to the last round of the AES competition were secure. Nobody was able to attack them, and people tried very hard. Some of the other contestants were attacked, and then they were disqualified. But they were secure. All of them were secure. But what made Rindal win the competition? So first of all, it was secure. It was as secure as the other ones. So all of the attacks that why is software? Why? Because in the 70s the world was this, and in the 90s the world was that. The world changed. People now wanted to do encryption on software, not just for hacking the banks. They needed to to connect to Facebook. I don't know, whatever they had in the 90s. MySpace. Contacting. Okay. So it was resistant to all sorts of attacks, linear cryptanalysis, differential cryptanalysis, and so on. And it was fast and or efficient. What does that mean, fast and or efficient? So there are 3 desirables, 3 things you want to do when you're implementing AES. You want it to be fast, which means high throughput. You can encrypt a lot of bytes per second. You want it to be cheap, and cheap means using as little silicon as possible, so small in hardware. And you want it to be power efficient. It means that the amount of joules you consume per encryption is the small, and then you can keep your battery running for a long time. So this is a design space, and you can optimize in all sorts of directions. You can make it fast, you can make it cheap, you can make it power efficient. You can't get all 3, but there is enough space there so each your product can choose a very good solution. And specifically, it's really, really good to run it on. It runs really well on 8-bit microcontrollers, which we're going to attack today. And one of the things which was really nice is that the design of AES is quite simple and elegant, and there are no magic values. So the substitution box it uses, the S box, is designed on just a standard mathematical operation. The MixColumns is used. I'll explain all of these later. They're all based on very standard or self-explanatory methods, and because of that, there is no real good place for NSA to put out the backdoor. And the change that NSA made between Rindal and AES was just to fix the input size to 16 bytes. So they didn't say, you know what, take this bit and change it a little. We're not telling you why. This is what they did for this. They didn't do that. And one nice thing I really like is some guy called Jeff Moser, which now is working in Kaggle, I think. He published a beautiful Creative Commons licensed guide to AES, and I'm going to go through it now. So let's see if I cover. Okay, so AES is an iterated cipher. Iterated cipher means that it has a basic round structure, basic operations, and it does them over and over and over and over and over again until it gets the ciphertext. So how does it work? You take the plaintext, you have a state register. It's 16 bytes, and usually it's viewed as 4 by 4 because of the way AES works. You put your plaintext in this state register, and then you start modifying it and modifying and modifying and modifying and modifying. After you've done this 10 times, your state contains the ciphertext, and you're finished. And this round operation has 4 sub-rounds, which are called SubBytes, ShiftRows, MixColumns, and add key or add round. And I want to show you how they're implemented on an 8-bit microcontroller, and again with a view of how do we attack it. So let's begin with AES. So the first thing we do here is add key. We take the plaintext and we XOR it with the key. Why is the first thing we do an XOR with the key? Why don't we do something else first? In this, they did something else first. I'm not sure how this is going to be. The first thing we do in AES is XOR it with the key, the state with the key. So the reason we do it is that there is no security benefit in modifying the plaintext without getting the key mixed in. The whole point of encryption is to get the key mixed in with the plaintext. So if you do something without the plaintext, the attacker can do it as well. It doesn't make the cipher any stronger, only slower. So the first thing we do is add key. And then what we do is 9 times. We do this fantastic graphics by Jeff Moser. We do SubBytes, ShiftRows, MixColumns, add round key. Repeat, SubBytes, ShiftRows, MixColumns, add round key. We do this 9 times. And the last time we do SubBytes, ShiftRows, we don't do MixColumns, and then we add round key. Why do we skip MixColumns? Again, we skip MixColumns because the attacker can reverse it, and the attacker can do it because even though the round key is there, the last operation is add round key, but because of the structure, because add round key is a linear operation, I don't want to go into it here. Add round key is a linear operation, and MixColumns is a linear operation. Yeah, you can flip the order and undo it. So it doesn't really help anything. It just makes it slower. So the first and last rounds are different, but now I want to show you the internals of each one of these sub-rounds of operations, and again with the eye of an attacker. What will the attacker see when the attacker is measuring the power consumption of the device doing AES? So the first thing, SubBytes. SubBytes, you take the 16 bytes of state and you replace each byte with a value in a table called the S-box table. It's a table with 256 values, and the way it's generated is very, very above ground and open source. So there's no backdoor hidden in the way the SubBytes is generated, although it's built to be nonlinear, which is cool. And then you just do it 16 times. So if I'm an attacker and I'm sitting on the bus, and the device on the test is doing SubBytes, I'm measuring the power consumption on the bus. What will I see? What behavior what is going on when SubBytes is happening? So think about how it's going to be implemented in code. You're hired to Google hash table. Great. No. So yeah. So what I'm going to do? The state is written in memory because I don't have enough registers for the entire thing. So I'm going to read the state byte from memory. Then I'm going to use the state as an index into the lookup table. So there's a lookup table in memory. So I'm going to take the base address of this lookup table, and I'm going to add what I wrote, what I read. I'm going to have now an address in memory, which is an offset into the lookup table. And then I'm going to read this byte from memory. And then I'm going to write back into the state. So I'm going to read the state. I'm going to use the state as an index into a table. I'm going to read from the table. And I'm going to write again to the state. So what will I be seeing as an attacker? I'll be seeing data bus traffic, and I'll be seeing address bus traffic. And both of these things depend. So these depend on the secret. They depend on the secret state, right? Do you understand? So I'm going to use the value of the state byte as an index into the table, because this is what I'm doing, SubBytes in the lookup table. Okay, so this is SubBytes as an attacker. The next operation is ShiftRows. I really love this little comic. ShiftRows, you're just moving the data in the AES, you're just moving it around. You're taking the first row and keeping it in place, and the other rows, you're shifting them around. So how will you implement ShiftRows? And there's an easy way and a tricky way. No, so this is an 8-bit microcontroller. So I can only modify 1 byte of the state at the same time. So what is a trivial thing to do? I will be probably reading out the bytes of the state one by one and writing them back into memory, but in different locations. So I'll be reading and writing the same value, reading and writing, reading and writing. Yeah, I'll need some kind of temp, but that's okay. I can figure it out. I have enough registers for a temp variable. So this is one way of doing it. So I will be getting this side kind of leakage of the Hamming weight, not distance, Hamming weight of the state, but I already had it from before. But another thing I might be able to do, another way of implementing ShiftRows is implementing it in my imagination. So what does that mean? If you look at ShiftRows, you'll notice that it's just a thought experiment. I'm moving the rows around, but I can just switch the pointers around in my head. So it's possible to implement AES if you mix ShiftRows and MixColumns together. So MixColumns is going to look at the column instead of looking at columns. It's going to look at these crazy diagonals instead. So sometimes you don't implement ShiftRows at all, and then of course it doesn't leak at all. Okay, the next operation is MixColumns. So MixColumns is basically it's a matrix multiplication. Yeah, it's a matrix multiplication. Again, it's a very simple specification, which makes us confident that there's no fast stuff happening. And what happens is you take the columns of the state. Now you look at it as columns, and you run them through a linear function such that each byte in the new column is a function of all of the other bytes in the column. So you're doing what is called diffusion. You're mixing the bytes, you're mixing the bits around. And this is the 32-byte operation, a 32-bit operation. You're multiplying, so it's a vector multiplication. You're multiplying a 32-bit value by another 32-bit value, and the result is 32 bits. This is not very efficient to do on an 8-bit microcontroller. You can think about how do you do 32-bit multiplication with an 8-bit microcontroller. It's not so simple. But so one of the things that made AES win the competition is it's 8 times 4. It's not 32. I think 8 times 4 is 32. Even in 7:46 in the evening, I can get it right. I'm sure that no, we don't multiply it by itself. We mix the columns together. We take the column and we write a new column such that it's a linear operation which mixes all the columns together. It's a 32-bit operation. For a 32-bit processor, it's very simple to do. For an 8-bit microcontroller, it would have been difficult if not for the cleverness of Riemann and Dahmen that found a way to do it, a representation, a basis to do it, so that you can do it using only 13 operations, 13 8-bit operations, which are shifts and XORs. So it's quite a genius thing to do. So when I'm looking, when I do MixColumns, I have 13 operations, which are all shifts and XORs. I have also some temp variables and so on. Shifts and XORs, and I do a 13 for each column. So it's 13, 13, 13, 13. It's not a permutation. It's not a permutation because I mix all of the bytes together. It's quite nice to do. So again, when I'm looking at it as an attacker, I'm going to see these 13 elementary operations. It's not a permutation either. It's a linear combination. A linear combination. You can just read the specification at this phase. You just read it. And now the last operation I do is add round key. So I take this key, which was expanded earlier, and I XOR it. So how does this look as an attacker? I'm reading 1 byte of the state. This leaks the Hamming weight of the state. I'm reading one byte of the key, of the round key, which leaks the Hamming weight of the key. And then I XOR them inside the logic unit. And that doesn't leak a lot because this happens inside the logic unit. And then I write down the new state, which leaks the Hamming weight of the new state. Okay, so I get the state, I get the key, and I get the Hamming weight of their XOR. So you can think if you're kind of semi-functional at 8 p.m. in the evening, you can think about how much does this reduce your search space, how many values you have the value before the XOR, you have the Hamming weight of the value, and then the Hamming weight after the XOR. You can think of kind of a clever equations that you can write using add rounds. And so again, the ALU doesn't leak a lot, but the read and writes, they do leak. And okay, the last thing I have to tell you is how the round keys come from. So another nice thing about the AES, of course, the idea is that you have a 16 or 24 or 32-bit key, and you need to derive a lot of round keys to use during the computation. And the nice trick of AES is that you're going to use the building blocks that you already have since you implemented AES. So you already have MixColumns. Sorry, you already have SubBytes. So you're going to use SubBytes in a special way. And once you do this, you store the round keys somewhere. And Mangard showed quite early that if you are an attacker who can observe the key expansion, you are going to get to attack AES quite efficiently. But I can motivate. I can claim that there are situations where you can see the encryption, but you cannot see the key expansion. And why is that? The key expansion typically happens when the key is loaded. So you can imagine that there is a secure situation where the key is loaded, and then you're going out there to the field and you're going to play with the device after the key has already been loaded. So maybe you're a diplomat, you're like loading the key into your nice diplomatic device, and then you're going out to your mission, and there is no key expansion happening in the field, only the keys. So we know that there is simple power analysis attacks on key expansion are quite possible. This is that. So as I told you, if I want to implement it in native microcontroller, SubBytes is no problem. It's just a table lookup. ShiftRows is no problem. It's just memory accesses, or I just ignore it. Add key is just XORs, and MixColumns, there is an implementation of it. So in conclusion, AES is very quick to implement.